everyone. Welcome to the Essentials, free online classes on navigating the photojournalism industry and beyond. This is our fourth season, four, and it's all been made possible by partnering with grassroots photo organizations working toward inclusivity, equity, and access in the media, all amazing, wonderful things. And those organizations are the Everyday Projects, Black Women Photographers, and Photo Wings. My name is Danielle Villasana. I am actually a photojournalist, but I also wear many hats, and one of those is being a community team member of the Everyday Projects. The Everyday Projects is an amazing global community of visual storytellers, all committed to using imagery to combat harmful misperceptions and to rise above persistent inequality. We are actually a nonprofit, and we work to provide opportunities for our global community and to provide structure, support, and direction for the diverse and worldwide range of everyday photography groups. And for those of you who are newly joining this session, please tell us where you're tuning in from. We have people from all over the world, and I love that. I love seeing that. It's so cool. Like I said, I'm here today with the one and only incredible Polly Irungu, who is the founder of Black Women Photographers and sincerely one of the coolest, kindest, like so sweet, heart of gold people in our industry, who is really doing, not single-handedly, she has a team, but I kind of want to say single-handedly, but she has a team. I know, but Polly, you're just so amazing. Doing an incredible job at elevating the voices of Black women and non-binary creatives. Polly.
Well, thank you so much, Danielle. It's always a pleasure to be here with you guys. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and Marie for that beautiful first session to kick us off. I'm really excited about the Essentials. As she mentioned, this is the fourth season. So there's 3 previous seasons of like priceless, invaluable information if you just visit our websites to check out. As she mentioned, I'm the founder of Black Women Photographers. I see some familiar names in the chat, which is always exciting to see. So thank you all for tuning in. Excuse me. And we're super thankful for our sponsor, partner, Photo Wings. This would not be free without them. So please, please, please also, when you're thanking us for these materials, also thank Photo Wings for making this possible for us.
Yes. Thank you so much, Photo Wings. We love you. I just wanted to shout out too to a couple of the Everyday Projects team members who are here tirelessly working behind the scenes to make sure that everything is flowing smoothly. It is not just Polly and I who are, smooth. We have an amazing team. So I just want to give a shout out and a hug and a thank you to Rebecca Gibeon, Fiona Washira, and Austin Merrill, who along with Peter DeCampo are the co-founders of the Everyday Projects. And again, y'all, I just want to emphasize the amazing work Polly is doing with Black Women Photographers. So if possible, please consider making a donation to Black Women Photographers. No amount is too small, and Polly, you will appreciate that I also mentioned that no amount is too big. So it all counts to support their initiatives and operations. And with that,
we've got a really great lineup for y'all this weekend with some really stellar teachers talking about some of the most crucial topics that are necessary for paving a successful path as a visual storyteller. At the end of each presentation, there's a lot of time for Q&A, so please drop your questions into the chat as you've been doing earlier, as opposed to, into the quick question box as opposed to the chat, so that way we can keep track. And don't be shy. This is a safe space to ask anything and everything. This is why the teachers are here, because they want to help you answer any questions you have related to their class, the visual media industry. We hope that whatever you're just starting off as a seasoned photographer, or this maybe you're beginning, that this weekend will help you feel even more confident about your practice.
Yes, and as we've mentioned before, each class is recorded and videos will be available on the Everyday Projects, Black Women Photographers, and Photo Wings website. So here are our handles and URLs. All of the websites have a very large archive of amazing videos on all of these facets, like Polly mentioned about navigating the industry. And just before we jump in, another reminder for those who are joining in now, that at the end of today's classes, we'll be having a meet and greet at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, New York, basically, DC, East Coast. Join us and get to know some other photographers doing cool work in the world. Make sure to copy and paste that link wherever you can keep it safe. And without further ado, let's get started.
I'm really excited about this next one. We're so lucky to have our next teacher, Saiyna Bashir, with us here today to help us tackling editing. One of the hardest things to do as a photographer, Saiyna has had so much experience with this, as her assignment and project work has appeared in publications such as, and you may have heard of them, the New York Times, the Washington Post, National Geographic, the Telegraph, the Wall Street Journal, and many others. She also has experience working with NGOs such as UNICEF, UNHCR, WHO, IMF, and WFP. To top off her incredible list of accomplishments, she's also been on the selection committee for World Press Photo 6x6 initiative. She was a TEDx speaker, and she's been a contributor to Everyday Pakistan, Woman Photograph, Diversified Photo, and also is an alum of the Eddie Adams Workshop. And wow, I know that's just like a little taste of what you've done. We can't wait to hear all you have to share with us today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. As you all know, I'm based in Pakistan, and I do work independently as an independent photojournalist. I moved back to Pakistan almost 6 years ago. And it was not easy to start getting assignments in the first place. And it took a lot of like reaching out to editors, signing up at with different platforms. And then once I did that, with time, I started getting assignments. But because I work independently, it's very different from when you're in a newsroom and you have an editor overseeing your work, or you go out with a reporter, because there's a lot that you kind of have to do on your own. And there's a lot of moving parts. So for example, when an editor reaches out to me, a lot of times, or a client, a lot of times it's a one-liner. This is what the story is about. This is what we need. And then kind of you have to visualize the story. You have to see who are all the people that you should talk to and research into how you're going to tell the story visually. I find it really helpful to work with local journalists. So for example, if I'm working in another province, in another city, and I don't know enough about that place, I would reach out to a local journalist and I would start talking to them about the story. That helps you gain access into a certain community, getting contacts, locations, all of that. But I also wanted to mention that apart from visualizing the story and how you're going to document it, I also have to keep in mind my safety and security, being based in Pakistan and working as a woman. It's very important for me to go out with a trusted driver. The logistics are a big part of how you plan the assignment. And it's super important to have a driver that you can trust, and also someone who knows the area. So this is, and sometimes it also feels a bit lonely because, like I said, I don't work with other reporters a lot of times. I just go on my own. And in my case, a lot of times I would get, the first thing I do is visualize the story. And for example, the story is about the current inflation in Pakistan. I would go to gas stations. I would photograph people over there and get their emotions as the gas prices skyrocket. I would go to the stock exchange building. I would visit various charities where people are distributing free meals. I would go to markets and speak with shopkeepers and take portraits of them and see how their sales have been affected. So this is just an example of how I would visualize a certain story. because I think we need to be storytellers first, and then we need to decide what media we're going to take, whether it's going to be photos or videos. It's important to absorb your environment, and be observant. So when you're out and about, just see what's happening around you. How are people reacting to a certain environment? What are their reactions to their surroundings? And I think it's important to be curious, and that helps you come up with ideas when you receive a certain assignment. Before we get into the details of the editing process, I just wanted to mention that this can vary from person to person. You can take inspiration from how I organize my work, but you can do it any other way that you'd like. I just wanted to mention that it's really important to keep a backup of your work. I have learned the hard way. So what I typically do is, after I photographed an assignment, I would make a separate folder for each day. And once I'm done shooting, I usually use Photo Mechanic, and I would look at the day's edit in Photo Mechanic, and I would make a selection. And I've realized that this is the most important part of the editing process, because this is where you make selects. This is where you select your work. And I think it's really important to take your time with this, because sometimes you may end up with more photos than you need, which also means that you have to then edit and tone those photos and also caption them. And also, just to make the editor's life easier, you have to kind of make sure that they have enough to choose from, but you're also not sending them way too many photos to look through. And I would also recommend sending your strongest work, because sometimes, if you've shared a certain photo that you're not too sure about and it ends up getting published, you're like, oh my God, that's not my strongest work, but you did send it. So make sure that you are happy with the work you're sending, but you're also kind of arrange it in a way and edit it in a way that it tells a story. So you would start with a scene setter, and you would have different angles, different parts of the story, whatever it is, some portraits, some close shots, and then a strong ending. So that even if the photos, if you look at them independently and they're not part of a story or anything, you still kind of, you still know what the story is by just looking at the pictures. And I think that's really important as storytellers, to make sure that whatever you're showing visually tells the story, whether people have the time to look at the captions or read the story or not. The pictures should just, tell the story. And once I've done that, I go over twice sometimes and take some images out at the end, at the very end, because I think it's important, like I said, to share your strongest work, and then also rearrange them. So I do this in Photo Mechanic. You can do it in Lightroom or any other software that you're comfortable with. And once I've toned the images in Photoshop, I've captioned them. While I'm on assignment, I take down names and locations and other details in my notes on my phone. This makes it much easier at the captioning stage. And the more detail you can add to the captions, the better it is. Just whatever you see, it's obviously the 5 W's, what, where, when, how, and this makes the captions. You have to have really strong captions. I think that's really an important part of the editing phase. I usually use either at the FTP, if the client has shared an FTP link, or WeTransfer to share the images. I'm just going to now share my screen and show you a project that I recently worked on. This was for the Washington Post, and I did have the privilege of working with a reporter on this one. And Annie Gowen traveled from the US, and we were working together. But since she was not a local, I was very much involved in the logistics and the planning of the assignment. We had to shift things last minute because we weren't really getting what we wanted for the story in a particular city. So then we changed that and we moved to another city, and we just kind of ended up actually getting what we needed. So sometimes you have to change plans last minute. It's just good to be flexible. I'm just going to share my screen and show you the edit that I sent to the editor, and then the published piece as well. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
This is so cool. Thank you, Saiyna.
I'm just trying to. So I sent about 160 photos to the editor, and this is from 5 days of work. And the story was about how climate change and heat impacts health in particular. And Pakistan, one of the two most hottest places in the world, one of them is Jacobabad, and it's in Pakistan. And basically, we just went around and talked to people. We met with people who lost their family members in the recent floods. We met with family members who lost their loved ones because of a heat stroke. And not only that, these people live in a very extreme climate. They also have very little to rely on. They don't have electricity. In a lot of cases, they don't even have a fan. And so I went around and I sort of documented how people were dealing with heat and with the climate. So for example, over here, this young girl and her father are bathing their buffalo because even animals get so hot, and they rely on them heavily for their livelihood. So this is the wide edit that I sent to my editor. And this was basically a interactive story that the Post did. So they ended up publishing this photo, and this is the lady that lost 2 of her children in the recent floods. And then you just keep scrolling down, and there are a lot of like graphics. I can also share the link in the chat for you guys. So it had a lot of these maps, and this was really cool. And it was, so we were working with a graphic person out of London, and we were in touch with them while we were on assignment, so that to make sure that we were getting all the data and everything that they needed. So these are the photos that end up being used. So I sent about 160 photos, and I think about 10 to 15 were used, and that's just how it is. You just like narrow it down, and actually they use quite a few photos in this story. And it also ended up being on the front page of the Washington Post. And this is really interesting, because you never know what photos are going to end up being used. And that's always really interesting to see, compare sort of your own edit with the editor's final selection. And yeah, it's fun to see it come to life. I'm happy to start taking any questions if you guys have.
Yes, actually, there's a question on this note with you sharing your work. Can you walk us through about the photos that you actually send the editor? Like when you mentioned you start with like a scene setter.
Yeah, so it's important to like basically establish where you are, whether it's, something that shows what city is it, what's the place like. You kind of like take your audience into this space. So you basically show something that's maybe a wide angle of the city, or maybe it's a busy market, whatever the story is about. You kind of like figure it out what you're going to show that actually tells people where you are, and then you kind of take it from there. I try to make sure that I send enough variety to the editor, to make it easier for them, because you are their eyes and ears. Basically, they're not there, so you have to like really show them what everything. So I make sure that I'm documenting enough, for the editor to then find it easier in the edit room.
And for this specific assignment, are you able to pull up the article? Because I think somebody mentioned that they want to see the article, the final product.
You want me to share the link?
Yes, if you're able to.
Yeah, definitely.
And then when it comes to actually making the photos, someone asked, how do you white balance and get the images to be so neutral? My photos often come out too orange or too blue.
So I think it's really important to make sure that when you're in the field and you're taking the photo, it's as close to being perfect as possible. So make sure not to take a photo in the first place, which is overexposed. Make sure that your settings are perfect, in the sense that you don't need a lot of editing in the edit room. And working for Reuters, for example, was really helpful because they want JPEGs. So you don't even have any room to sort of edit or tone your images. And I think then you're more mindful when you're shooting and you're photographing to make sure that your settings and everything, the way you're shooting is basically, you don't have to do a lot of post-production. And as photojournalists, we're not even allowed to. All you can do is slightly tone your images, sharpen them, add some contrast. And there's just very basic editing in post that you can really do. And just bringing the highlights down, I think shooting in RAW also is helpful, because then in post it becomes easier to tone your images. But I've learned this myself. I've learned from editors, from mentors. I think there are a lot of YouTube tutorials. I can share them also later. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Apart from the assignments, how do you edit your work for your personal projects?
That's a really good question. I think that's even harder to do, because you're editing your own work is not easy to begin with. But I guess when it's for an assignment, you have more clarity over what the story is. You've got a deadline. You know that you've got to share a certain amount of images, and you tone them, and you really know where the story is going and what it is. But with your personal projects, I guess because you have time, and the story also, your project keeps developing as well. So I think it's helpful when I show my work to another photographer, just to get like another perspective, because it's sometimes easier if you sort of get someone else's feedback and what they think about it, because you're looking at the same images over and over again, and it's sometimes not easy to pick and choose which ones you're going to use.
And I think that also brings us into a really good point about just like how you decide to showcase your website, how you made the edits for your own site. I pulled up her site here so you can see, and I'm just like, wow, look at that opening image. Can you walk us through your thought process on how you built your site of like presenting your best work on your website?
So I went through my work over the past few years, And I started like taking out the best photos that I liked, that were published, some were not even published. And I sort of wanted the editors to see the variety of the stuff that I can shoot. So I made sure that they're not just portraits or scene setters. It shows a little bit of variety, of different angles, of like different stories. And it wasn't, yeah, and just going through that and bringing it down to 15, 20 images is not easy, but I did show around 30 to 40 images to a friend, and they helped me narrow it down. And I think that's really helpful. Talk to as many people as you want, but also really know what your own like identity is and what your strongest work is and how you want to show that.
Yes.
On that note, you're like, Danielle's frozen. No, I wasn't. I just wasn't moving. Saiyna, thank you so much. I didn't get to say that. So thank you. Yeah, just so wonderful to hear the inner workings of how Saiyna makes these beautiful edits. And I have a question for you. Do you have any like tips or tricks or things that you do to help you narrow down? Because I know it's like, I think we all struggle with that, looking at our own work. You know, there's a lot of like different phrases around that, right? Kill your darlings, which is a little violent and probably think of a different phrase. But you know, it's always been that thing where you're like, I had to climb to the mountaintop to get this picture and didn't eat for 12 hours. But like, if it doesn't tell the story, it doesn't work. So sorry, it's got to go. And it's really hard to do that when it's your own work by yourself, looking at your own work. So do you have any like little things that you tell yourself, or how do you push yourself to like cut those images from an edit that you just struggle with cutting?
No, I think that's something I've learned over time. Because initially I always used to, I mean, if you probably looked at my website a few years ago, there probably would be a lot more images than there are now. I guess that also happens when you really understand the power of storytelling, because if a picture really doesn't do that, then it's easier to not use it. You're just like, okay, this is a great photo, I like it, but what is it really doing? Is it serving the purpose? Is it telling a story? Is it powerful enough that just a standalone photo is strong enough to tell a story? And I think that has been helpful to keep that in mind when I'm narrowing down my work, because instead of treating it as one story, I start treating them as each individual photo, and whether it's strong enough content wise, colors are okay, there's not overexposed, and it tells a story basically. And I think that has helped me narrow it down significantly.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think, you know, like making sure that each photo builds on the next and that there's not too much repetition. I mean, repetition in any creative, you know, entity, whatever, repetition can just bore the viewer, right? So if you have too many photos that look the same in terms of like composition or in terms of what the information that you're showing, people are going to be bored. So you've got to pick the stronger of the two. So definitely that is great advice. You know, what is the story, and stick to the story and not get too repetitive with the story is really great advice. So we have some more questions for people. Okay, here's a specific question about the topic, but some people do have questions that are related more to like your trajectory as a photojournalist, which I think would be great to answer since you touched on that as well. But to stick to the theme just for one more second, do you have any tips on how to differentiate an edit for a grant versus for an editor?
I think for a grant, I would edit a lot more. I would basically have a lot more work to show and sort of look at the end, because also with grants, you work for a longer period of time. It's a long form work as compared to an assignment that you work on maybe 2 or 3 days at the most. And I think I would make sure to show an editor a wider edit if it's a grant as compared to if it's a story. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah. And I think with anything too, like oftentimes, because Polly and I have co-hosted like many together, let me just say, I feel like oftentimes the sort of message that's continuously relayed in different ways is like, just keep working on it. Like, because every time you do that thing, whether it's a grant or a contest application or an edit of your work, or going out and photographing, like every time you do it, you're going to get better. You're going to see where the holes are, where the gaps are. And so just like the more you do the thing, whatever that thing is, the better you're going to get at it. So just keep doing it. I feel like editing was a really hard thing for me to learn. Like, as you said, Saiyna, like you learned over time. I think that's definitely true with me too. So relatable. Like the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So thank you. And I think Polly's going to jump us into some questions that people have that's more just about like your career path and how do you even start this thing.
Yes, definitely. And I also just want to mention related to the grants real quick that we have covered I think 2 or 3 or 4 times now, specifically for grants and grant writing. So if you go to our sites, like we mentioned at the beginning of this, just dive into our previous seasons. We have really unpacked that on various occasions. But diving into just like you as a photojournalist, can you walk us through like how you like first got started? We have, we mentioned all the amazing publications you worked for at the beginning of this class, but take us back to your first assignment and how you got started into photojournalism and getting these continuous assignments.
So I used to take photos for fun when I was in high school. It started off as a hobby. And when I was in my undergrad, I was in Pakistan at BNU. And then during my thesis year, I was researching the role of media in Sikh tourism in Pakistan. And I asked my advisor if I could do an amalgamation of photos and text, which was unusual because usually it's either or. And I was grateful that they let me do that. And I took some photos for my thesis. And I just put them up on Facebook, and a friend of mine ended up resharing it. And on her friends list was this editor who worked for a Pakistani newspaper. And they reached out to me and they said, can we publish these photos? And that was the first time I ever got published. And it was more than half a page in the newspaper. And I was like, this is so exciting. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that was really how it all began. And then I just kept taking photos. I moved to the US for my master's. I wanted to do photojournalism, but I got a full scholarship to do my master's in reporting and writing. And I think I just took a lot of initiative, and I did a lot of internships, workshops. I had good mentors, other photographers, and I just kept taking photos. And after I graduated, I started working as a staff photographer at Capital Times in Madison, Wisconsin, before I moved back to Pakistan.
Thank you so much. And on a note of mentors, actually, somebody asked, how did you go about finding a mentor? It's an area they struggle in. They've sent out emails and attended different seminars and workshops, but they don't want to come across too pushy.
That is a really good question. When I was in grad school, that's when the Ferguson riots happened, and that was the first time that I covered a protest in America. And I was a student at that time, but I went out on spec. I had a friend who was on assignment, and I was just shadowing them. I was just taking photos, not for a publication, but just for my portfolio, and because I wanted to be there and I wanted to document that story. And while we were out and about, at the protest, I met with Adris Latif, who is one of my mentors. He's a Reuters photographer, and he looked at me and he said, where are you from? I said, I'm from Pakistan. And he was like, okay, here's some hand warmers, because it was really, really cold. And then when we got done, he was like, okay, I want to see what you shot. And I thought that was so kind of him, because he was really busy and he was actually on an assignment, whereas I wasn't. But yeah, you do find good people. It's just about, if you're covering the similar things, if you just go out and you're at protests, just see who else is there, who are the people who are shooting. And I guess more than reaching out, these more intimate workshops really help. So I think I made a lot of mentors through the Eddie Adams workshop. I would highly recommend it to people because that's a more intimate setting, and over a period of 2-3 days, you are surrounded with industry experts. You get time to speak to them one-on-one, and I think that was really helpful.
Yes, and on the note of the Eddie Adams workshop, I just want to mention again to anyone listening here that I myself applied 3 times. So just a reminder to everyone to keep trying, don't get discouraged, take those opportunities when you don't get accepted or an editor doesn't respond, to take a look back at your work, reflect honestly, say what am I missing, what can I do better? And at the very least, just, keep trying, keep photographing, keep, the 3rd time, 4th, 5th, 10th. I mean, there are some grants or contests that I had applied to like probably 9 times until I got it. So just keep trying. Don't give up. We have another question about connecting with communities. So I know you do photograph a lot within Pakistan, which is amazing. And we definitely do want to encourage, folks to photograph within your own communities in your own backyard. But, what do you do to connect with communities that may not be as accessible or part of your own community? This person says, Erica Franklin says, I'm wanting to start a personal storytelling project about Native Americans in Texas and Oklahoma. Come visit me if you make it to Houston, and their way of life. I'm an anthropology major that is wanting to tie in my photography with my degree. Let's definitely meet up, Erica, if you make it to Texas, because I would love to hear more about your path in anthropology. Okay, Saiyna, what are your tips on, even, you can even take it beyond just, community. How do you meet, the people you photograph? How do you even find people to photograph? Yes, go.
Like I mentioned earlier, I think it's really helpful to work with a local journalist. So for example, if I'm working in Sakkar, which is in this down south in Pakistan, in Sindh, I would reach out to a local journalist and talk to them and share what the story is. A lot of times they can work. I don't like to use the term fixer because they're like colleagues, but they basically help you with access. They also know their area really well. So they would know exactly which village to go to. And then usually what they do is they would first reach out to an elderly in the village, somebody that is well respected, or a lot of times a lady health worker, for example, because she's the one who is from that community, who knows everyone respects her, because she's the one who kind of refers them to various clinics and helps them out getting medicine for their children and all kinds of things. So a lot of times the local journalist would put me in touch with her, and then she would kind of take me around the village. And when you're with somebody that they already trust, they automatically start trusting you as well. And I think the other thing is to obviously not take out your camera right away and just go and talk to people and get to know them, and give them an opportunity to get to know you. And the more relatable you can be, it's also about how I dress up. I would never wear anything fancy. I would not wear any jewelry, because you're going into places where you don't want to seem like you are an outsider. You can't change that. But whatever you can do to not make people feel like you're an outsider, it's really helpful. It's really helpful.
That is such valuable golden advice, that sometimes it's not just about immediately taking pictures, and you can apply that too to even like news or breaking news situations where you can work slowly and gracefully and with care and actually just talking to people first before you start taking pictures. It really will translate through your work because you will have that trust, that intimacy with that person before you even pick up your camera and start taking pictures, right? They'll feel comfortable with you. And when people are comfortable, then they kind of forget that you're there, and then you're a fly on the wall and you're photographing those beautiful, intimate moments that really tell us about, you know, people and their stories. So thank you for bringing that up. In the chat, I was like, such great advice in all caps. So that was a great, really super golden. Polly, what other questions we got here? We still got a ton, y'all. We've got a few questions here, and please keep them coming because we've got lots of time left still. I think, right? Yes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
If you could open up your photo mechanic sheet again. You mentioned earlier the importance of like getting it right, like while you're there, like doing the best that you can do to make it perfect while you're shooting. There's a question here asking about, you know, in the field, and since you have to get it right and send it to your editor, what's the most efficient way to set your white balance? Do you use a grade card? Or is it just eyeballing your histogram? So how do you make it right while you're photographing as best as possible, so that way you don't have to do so much work in post?
Right. So in Pakistan, especially in the summertime, the light is super harsh. And if I'm photographing outdoors, I would make sure that my shutter speed is over 1500 at least. And my ISO is not more than 100. You have to just make sure that it is what you're seeing, like on your camera when you take a photo. You can tell whether you can make it darker, whether it is a little more overexposed, and you just that's what the button on your camera is really important. Like, you have the screen, you can see what you're shooting. And we're privileged and lucky because that didn't used to be the case, because photographers could never see their work unless they developed the film. So because we can see what we're shooting, just play around with the settings. I would say just experiment, just literally just play around with it, and then you'll get a hang of what the right settings are for a particular environment.
Thank you. In terms of like what you use to shoot, what is in your gearbox? What is your toolkit?
So I shoot with a Canon 5D Mark III. My favorite lens is a 35mm. And I also have a 24 to 70, and I also have a 70 to 200, and I have a 50mm. So this is my kit, and I just got an R5, but I'm still shooting with the 5D, and I still love that camera so much. But I knew it was time to upgrade. I knew it was time to get a new one because I've had it for forever. So that's my kit. And I also have a small LED light, which you can change the color, you can make it warmer, you can make it whiter, and you can just also, I can also share the link with everyone later. So that's also useful. I found it useful to have in the kit.
Amazing. I'm like, wow, that's an impressive kit, I gotta say. I'm like, oh, that's where I'm going wrong. I need a 50 and a and a light. That's how I can photograph like Saiyna. Okay, thank you. So I'm so glad that Peter asked this question, Peter Aronson, who is here with us today, because I was also wondering, I wanted to hear what you had to say about this, but what do you think about working with NGOs? You know, Peter says, you know, sadly, the local journalism industry is, you know, not so thriving where he is. There's very little enterprise journalism in my region and zero investigative. And I think this is a great way to, like, again, you know, Lindsay will be speaking about this in the next class, but diversifying your income stream, you know, thinking about, you know, beyond just editorial assignments or relying only on editorial assignments. So how did you even do that? How did you build up such an amazing portfolio of work with NGOs?
I think I think somebody put me in touch with a editor at UNICEF a couple of years ago. And I sort of showed them my work and I started working with them. And I guess it's a small community, especially in a certain country. And I'm based in Islamabad, and I made sure to do that because that's where a lot of INGOs are. That's where a lot of foreign correspondents are. That's where the work generates from. I'm from Karachi, but I'm based in Islamabad because it was a better idea to be based there. And I guess once you start working with them, you start getting noticed, and then you start getting more assignments, more clients. It's also not that easy to navigate the UN space. There's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of the contracts and the third-party contracts. There's a lot to maneuver, and I think it takes time to fully understand how it all works. But like I said, it is important to diversify your work these days. Even in Pakistan, there isn't that much. I mean, there is news, but a lot of my work is geared towards NGO work, and I enjoy doing that as well. But yeah, it pays the bills, and I think it's important work, but because what you're doing is what you're photographing helps these organizations raise more funding, and also show their donors how they worked on the project and what they came up with.
Yes, and I think, like you said, pays the bills. I mean, having your hands in lots of different baskets can be a way to ensure stability in this field. So, try to find the NGOs working in your region, and just like you would with a, photo editor at a publication, send them an email. Hey, I'd love to meet for coffee and introduce myself and show you some work, that I've been doing, would love to collaborate, etc. So it's a similar approach, but again, just kind of putting yourself out there. So thank you, Saiyna, for sharing that with us. This was a question that was actually from the previous session that we didn't get time to answer, and it's a really, really good one. And I think you would have a lot of insight on this. But can you talk a little bit more about what editors look for in a photographer's work, like what you've learned as a photographer? Because Marie, who spoke previously, is a photographer, but now is in an editing role. I mean, she's still taking pictures and stuff on assignment too, but you have never worked as an editor, right? So what have you learned as a photographer, sending material to editors, sitting with them in portfolio reviews, going to workshops? What do you think makes them say, oh, wow, this photographer stands out and we want to work with them?
I think, of course, having a strong portfolio is what they're looking for. But I think they also, at the end of the day, take a chance with you, right? If they give you a certain assignment and it's your first assignment with them, and you do a good job, not only taking photos, but also delivering on time, being reliable, being accessible. I think those are really, really important, and editors really appreciate that, because a lot of times they are really busy with other assignments. They're managing a lot of different photographers at the same time. And if they trust you enough, they'll just send you literally a message saying, this is what the story is. And they'll know that you will make it happen. You will figure it out. You will visualize it. You will get access. You will do it on your own and deliver. I think that's something that they really appreciate.
Yeah, you have touched on something that is so important, is to be fast and to be reliable. Sometimes, like, if I see, like, even if I'm in the middle of something, if I see a phone number that it's like, Seattle, DC, New York, I pick it up immediately.
Yeah.
And you get better at that too, right? Like doing things on the run or on the go, right? But like, if you don't respond, they're going to reach out to the next person on their list. So being reliable and quick as you possibly can is really important. So thank you so much for mentioning that.
I just wanted to add that it's also not easy with the time difference. Because sometimes I would get a message at 10 p.m. for me or 11 p.m. So sometimes I mean, a lot of times I work Pakistan time and Eastern time and whatever other time zone. And it's a lot. It is a lot. But then, you know, that's part of the job. That's what it takes. You just, like you said, you've got to be responsive. And I think once this editor said that usually they give you 15 minutes to respond, and if you don't respond within 15 minutes for a breaking news, then they'll find someone else.
Yeah, for breaking news, that makes sense. And if breaking news is happening where you are, make sure you're paying attention to your emails and even be proactive, right? Maybe write to that editor and say, hey, I'm on the ground, I'm at this situation, here's a link to my website, like I'm available for assignment, you know, super quick, and make sure the title says like something that will catch their eye. Thank you for bringing that up. Wow, such valuable advice. And Polly, I know we have some more questions, but we got one just in that I just want to piggyback off of, and then passing the mic to you. But where do you find contacts for editors? How do you, it's again, the chicken or the egg situation, right? Danielle just said, reach out to an editor. Well, I don't even have editor contacts. Dummy. How do you get, you know, so it's that frustrating, like, how do you start when you have nothing to grasp onto? So how do you get editor contacts in the first place?
I think portfolio reviews are really helpful, especially visiting them doing them in person as compared to doing virtual portfolio reviews. Those are also helpful. But when you do them in person, you get a chance to really get to know the other person. You get to exchange contacts. I remember I did a New York Times portfolio review in 2014. That's where I got a lot of contacts. And make sure whenever you go to a portfolio review, carry your own business cards as well, so that you can distribute them, so people people know where to find you. And I think workshops as well. The Eddie Adams was really helpful. That's where I got a lot of contacts for editors. And then you just sort of email them afterwards saying, thanks, it was great to connect with you. It was great meeting you. Just send a little note. And yeah, that's how you get contacts. You just go to reviews and go to workshops. Those are helpful.
Thank you for that. And for those, you know, who may not know what a portfolio review is, feel free to go on our site. We have a little explainer on what it is. We host dozens of free portfolio reviews with different publications throughout the year. And there's so many others who also do portfolio reviews. But you can also just reach out. Like you can just like literally, you know, do a Twitter search, LinkedIn search, whatever type of search, and just see you know, them there and reach out to them and ask them for their email. Sometimes if I find an email for somebody else, I know that they may not be the best person, like that they may not be the editor, but maybe they're the writer, I email them anyway and ask them to put me in touch with the editor or whatever. That's what I've done in the past. We have a question here that I really like, that I want us to get to. Somebody asked, would you be open to sharing a story about what you did, maybe you did wrong, and how and what you learned from that experience when on assignment?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think.
Saiyna's perfect.
No,
I'm kidding. I mean, in my eyes, you are. but tell us the goss. Tell us the goss. We want to tease, Saiyna.
I'm thinking. Yeah, it's, you know, sometimes the assignment also falls through, and the editors they also understand this. You know, sometimes it's not even your own fault, but maybe on the last minute, the subject you're photographing changes their mind. They don't want to do it anymore, or a certain event that you were going to cover has been canceled, or stuff like that. I mean, that's not necessarily your fault, but it just, I mean, those are just challenges that you face in the field. I can't think of a specific experience, but if it comes back to me, I'll share it.
I'm like, I'm glad the question wasn't for me, we'd be here for 2 hours. And then I did this thing, and you know, but it's also like about how you recover, right? Just like Saiyna said, you know, a lot of times things aren't your fault, right? So if you can professionally explain that, or also sometimes what I'll do, you know, I have a toddler at home. So I've learned a lot from parenting. Like, okay, you want raspberries? We don't have raspberries, but we have apples. You know, so it's like, you know, so sometimes even with editors, like something came up, this is effed, but I came up with this solution, you know, so like it's how you can recover, how you can pivot to help them find a solution. Like Saiyna mentioned, editors are the busiest people on planet Earth. Like we think we're busiest photographers, we are not. Editors are managing and juggling so many things at once. So remember that when you don't get a response, right? Follow up and don't take it personally, right? But my point in bringing that up was, if you are on assignment for them, you know, don't explain. Sometimes you want to explain, and then this and this and this and like pages and pages. No. Just cut to the point. And what's the solution? Voila, like move on, right? So really great advice there, Saiyna, on the one mistake you've ever made, because you're awesome. I'm just kidding. All right, Polly, I know we've got some more questions, and please keep the questions coming out because we've got about 10 more minutes with Saiyna, and she's a treasure trove of information. So yeah, Polly, what else we got from people?
Yeah, somebody said, I'm a photographer and audio journalist. Of course, it's not possible to shoot and record at the same time. Do you recommend trying to combine both on the same project, or using my different skill sets on different projects?
With photography and? Sorry, I didn't get that.
Yes, photographer and audio journalist.
Photographer, I mean, you know, it's obviously not ideal to do a couple of things at the same time, but that's the nature of the job, and that's what editors also appreciate these days. So if you are taking photos and you shoot a little bit of video for them, they appreciate that. And I think it's important to be flexible like that, and sort of yeah, exactly. And I think it's okay to do that, because actually recording audio will help you build relationship with who you're photographing as well, because I would imagine you're interviewing them, you're asking them questions, you're recording their audio, and that gives you a chance to just have a conversation with them, and then you photograph. That's what I would suggest. Like if you're doing audio, first do the audio interviews and then take the photos.
Yeah, that's great advice. And also, like, I mean, I said this in the chat, but like, it can also be more money, right? Like if you're doing video or audio or whatever, it can be more money, which isn't the point. The point is to like tell the stories in the best way possible. But, you know, secondary importance is like, you know, we do have to pay our bills and, you know, have a roof over our head and food on our plate. So being able to charge for the work that we do is also great. So the more skills you have, the more money you can make, which also goes for writing. A lot of times photographers, you know, you can offer to write the text, and that can be another way to supplement a little bit from, you know, just the photography. So, we have a question that just came in right this second. Oh my gosh, another one. Keep them coming. How do you charge? I was gonna pivot, but this is a piggyback. So how do you charge when you do both photo and video jobs? Yeah, I think we'll go with that one first. So how do you charge? What do you charge? $1 million.
No, just probably double the photography day rate, ideally, or you give them a discount and you do and you add another half day to the photography day rate. That's how I would do it.
Yeah, that's great. I like double or triple. You know, sometimes if you, I mean, the frustrating thing with freelancing sometimes is we don't know, right? Women Photograph right now is, you know, doing a study, research, collecting data on like what actually freelancers are being paid, because sometimes it changes, even, you know, so sometimes when I don't know, I'll just be like, what's your budget? And sometimes the budget is way more than I would have ever said. So I'm like, oh, great. Well, I was thinking $500 more than you just said. So, so sometimes like, put the ball in their court. Yeah. So
I agree.
And then we're getting, okay, well, we can answer that question, I think, as a type question. But okay, again, a chicken or the egg situation. And I know you did bring this up a little bit in your presentation. But like, yeah, like what for you and your path, how did you break into this? I mean, you mentioned, a little bit about that, but how did you like start really building the momentum once you like got one thing and then another? And is there anything, someone asked this in the previous session that I thought was really great. Are there any like essential tips that you would recommend for people who are just starting off? Like whether it's like absolutely have this, so does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Holly's like looking at me
like
question. I'm kidding.
I think the best advice I could give is do not give up, keep shooting, keep at it. Being persistent does pay off eventually. And I know it's tough because you're just like, oh my God, I have not been getting enough assignments and I want more. And you just have to be patient with it, I guess. Because with time, all of that does happen. But I think not giving up is key, because it's very easy in this industry to get disheartened and feel like, you're not good enough or you're not getting enough work and maybe you should do something else. And sure, you definitely can do that. But I think I have just stayed persistent and I have just been at it. One time I emailed an editor and the email bounced and the editor was out of office, but somebody else emailed me back saying, oh, I'm just, covering for this person. But it's great to connect with you. And now I work regularly with that publication. So it's sometimes luck. It's sometimes you take a chance. Sometimes you never know how the other person will respond, but, don't give up. Keep reaching out to people, I would say.
Yeah, that is, I think, a beautiful, beautiful, encouraging and inspiring note to end on. Yeah, and don't take it personally, right? That also ties into not giving up, right? Believe in yourself, know that what you're doing is worthy, and sometimes it just takes time. So that was a beautiful, lovely note to end on. Thank you so much, Saiyna, for your time and all of your incredible knowledge. I, for one, loved just hearing you, and I am a big fan of you as a person and your work. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me here. I had a great time talking to you all. And thank you for your amazing questions. Really good ones. And please feel free to reach out to me on my Instagram. I will get back to you, or my email, with any follow-up questions you might have. Please let me know.
That's how you build your community. Take her up on that. She means it. Like, write to her. And she's very nice, as you can tell. She won't bite your head off.
Thank you. We will be starting the next class in just a moment with Lindsay Witherspoon, who has so much wisdom to share on how to diversify your income stream, something we can all benefit from if you're a freelancer. We wanted to once again thank our partner, Photo Wings, whose mission it is to highlight and help facilitate the power of photography to influence the world. As a nonprofit, they help photography to be better understood, created, utilized, seen, and saved.
Yes, thank you again so much, Photo Wings, for making the essentials happen alongside us at the Everyday Projects and Black women photographers. And for those who haven't heard it a dozen times already, it is very, very important. Remember that all of these videos are going to be recorded and published online forever and ever and ever and ever and ever on the Everyday Projects websites, Black women photographers, and Photo Wings. And will even be available in Spanish and French. So please take note again of our social medias, of our websites, to stay updated about all of that.
And as Danielle mentioned, this is season 4. So that means we've had 3 previous seasons that you can go and replay right now. There's topics that we have been scratched the surface on in these current conversations that in these previous seasons we've dived into, from grants to managing your finances, to even the editor's perspective. Those are all previous classes that you can replay, and fully dive into those topics that we are scratching the surface on in these current conversations. And don't forget, y'all, we have a meet and greet later today. We keep talking about community. What does it look like to build community? It means coming to these situations where you can actually meet, whether it's virtual or in person. And so we're doing a virtual meet and greet at 2:15 p.m. Eastern time, that you can join and meet some other photographers and like-minded visual and leaders in this situation here.
Yes, and now we are going to go for a little quick break, just to refuel, recharge. For those of you who have been with us since we started, go you. For those of us who just joined, you're awesome too. But yeah, we're gonna go for a quick break and we'll be back here at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, New York.
In like 35 minutes from now, y'all.
Yeah, thank you, Polly. In 35 minutes, wherever you are, for our next class with Lindsay Weatherspoon, who is going to be talking to us about going beyond the editorial box, a perfect segue from all of the topics that we've been talking about in terms of like money and diversifying income. So please come back and join us. We're just all going to turn our videos and mics off. So go get that coffee, that cookie, that wine, whatever. And we'll see y'all soon. All right.